Go ahead and get started now. If y'all want to. Okay, so for the final speaker today, we have Andrija Filipović, and he will be speaking about mechanico-anthropocene, post-socialist necroecologies. Don't have to introduce Andrija. You've been with him for a couple days now, so I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you. So today I will be talking about intensities. I've been talking about plasticness for a while now, for like 2 days. I'm sort of sorry for that. But today I will be talking about intensities in a more broader context. Only if the presentation would let me do that. Yeah, it's not moving. So anyhow, while we get there, I would like to start with the definition of the term Anthropocene from Britannica Online. And the quote goes like this. Anthropocene epoch, an official interval of geologic time making up the third worldwide division of the Quaternary period, 2.6 million years ago to the present, characterized as the time in which the collective activities of human beings, Homo sapiens, began to substantially alter Earth's surface, atmosphere, oceans, and systems of nutrient cycling. A growing group of scientists argue that the Anthropocene epoch should follow the Holocene epoch, 11,700 years ago to the present, and begin in the year 1950. The name Anthropocene is derived from Greek and means the recent age of man. Oh, thank you. So that's the quote. And there are certain issues with this definition, as with any definition. I will return to those issues shortly. Before that, I would like to show how geologic time is classified according to the Geological Society of America. There are eons, eras, periods, epochs, and ages, and they're differentiated according to what is found in particular geological stratum, or how it's pronounced, stratum. Quaternary period mentioned in the quote consists of the Pleistocene, from Greek pleistos, meaning more, and the Holocene, which is officially current time or age. However, many argue that that should be changed because of the biogeochemical changes, biotic changes, fuels, pollution, and the presence of technofossils, synthetics, and nuclear energy. So far, I've been talking about synthetics mostly. That is, this could be used as marker for both the new geological epoch. It is important what marker is chosen, as these also can point to historical events or processes that brought those markers about. With biogeochemical changes, for example, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, and I will be just taking as an example nitrogen cycle, those got out of joint because of the development of agriculture, and especially the development and application of artificial fertilizers. The nitrogen cycle describes the movement of nitrogen from atmosphere, and it is 78%. It makes 78% of the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, through to Earth through soils and then back to atmosphere. So the living organic beings use that cycle actually to build the proteins and living matter as such. So nitrogen is a constitutive part of organic matter, and thus as the agriculture developed and the number of humans increased, so there appeared the need to produce more, which in turn meant impoverishment of soil despite the invention of corn, wheat, double crop beans rotation. That, on the other hand, led to the invention of the Haber-Bosch industrial process for synthesis of ammonia from atmospheric hydrogen and nitrogen, which produces ammonia gas needed for production of nitrates for fertilizers. Overuse of the fertilizers for the ever-intensive crop production disturbed the natural cycle of nitrogen. And that is what will remain visible in the future and can be used as a marker, since it is clearly not a natural spontaneous activity. Carbon cycle is similar in that regard, as the extraction and use of fossil fuels lead to the increase of atmospheric carbon, which causes the effect of global warming. Biotic changes include animal and plant species extinction. And according to some, there is a sixth great extinction underway. There were 5 previously, the asteroid killing the dinosaurs being one of them. The novelty here is that this extinction is brought about by human activity. Another marker is neobiota, that is the introduction of novel species to the environments that were not present in previously. Some of them are the so-called invasive species, but others include the stuff of our everyday lives in Europe, like corn, potatoes, vanilla, and so on. And I will be talking about another aspect of this species movement later on. So what I said previously, that the choice of a marker can point to a particular historical event or process, I meant this. That is shown on this slide. Namely, introduction of novel species can be related to the so-called discovery of America. And the same event, or rather the process, is also entangled with slavery, colonialism, development of capitalism, and genocide, as well as some coal plantation scene, as these lands were colonized for the extractive purposes. And indeed, the first forays in colonization of the Portuguese involved setting up the sugarcane plantations several decades before the Americas were discovered. With Industrial Revolution, that can be dated to Watt's invention of steam machine in 1784, we have the beginning of mechanization, but also a search for energy sources to fuel the machines. Hence, the cutting down of forests, described quite interestingly in Richard Powers' novel The Overstory, and following exhaustion of those resources turn to fossil fuels, first coal and then oil. In 1945, we have the atom bomb, with nuclear energy following closely behind and leaving radioactive waste. Plutonium 239, for example, has a half-life of 24,000 years, according to United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Half-life of uranium-238 is approximately 4.5 million years. So, and I've mostly talked about the great acceleration so far with the synthetics and consumerism and sharp rise, that saw sharp rise in the decades following the end of the Second World War. So, to return to the issue of the definition of the Anthropocene offered by the Britannica Online, we can now notice why the phrase "the collective activities of human beings" is not quite precise. Depending on the historical process, we can notice that not all human beings are equally responsible for whatever the process is in question. And that is the reason why the choice of the marker is important. It chooses the narrative about the Anthropocene. It also chooses the name. And currently there are 91 names or terms for the Anthropocene used to describe this new geological time, according to Franciszek Chwalczyk. And the dates, and these are some names, I couldn't put all 91 of them. And quite honestly, I don't even know what some of those mean and point to. But the point of this is to actually show that there are multiplicity of terms being exchanged and produced to describe this current age we are living in. And with those names, and I will return again to them, we can see that the dates of a thousand plateaus map quite nicely onto some of these. For example, chapter 10,000 years BC, the geology of morals, marks beginning of the Holocene, that is the end of the last age, and consequently the mass extinction of megafauna like mammoths, moas, and so on, which according to some can be connected to human activity. Chapter 13, 7000 BC, Apparatuses of Capture, marks systematization of agriculture in Mesopotamia and thus large-scale ecosystem change that followed, and it can be seen as a precursor to what I already talked about nitrogen cycle change. And chapter 14, 1440, the smooth and the striated, dates the development of mapping in Portugal in relation to the technological development of maritime navigation, and thus it is directly linked to colonialism, capitalism, slavery, and the movement of non-human animal and plant species. I also, while I was talking in my previous lectures about plastics, actually relied on this chapter about on the Deleuze and Guattari's conception of smooth and striated spaces and holy spaces, and then as I talked about that already, developed onto those concepts, the concept of stretchy space and the plasticness. Then, so I would relate this chapter also to the plastics and the plasticness intensity. So what I want to do here, and I mentioned that at the first lecture, is not so much to look for particular causes for the Anthropocene, if we choose to stick to that name, as to claim that we can argue that the current predicament we have found ourselves in has multiple causes. It follows then that there are multiple markers and multiple dates, as well as that multiple historical events and processes are intertwining to produce our contemporary environments that I have called necroecologies. Those environments are also multiple, like intensities that are effectuated in them. In a word, there are as many terms for the Anthropocene as there are intensities and vice versa. So all those 91 names or terms name a particular intensity or a bundle of intensities. Anthropocene should be then treated as a mechanosphere, or it is the Mechanthropocene. So that's my main argument throughout these lectures. So I have been speaking for 2 days about one bundle of intensities, plasticness, and today I would like to talk about several more: softness, warmness, whiteness, and playfulness. Intensities of softness and warmness are found in the chapter on geology of morals. Whiteness I relate to the chapter on faciality, while playfulness I connect to the one on the refrain. In the final instance, these intensities, including the plasticness, all interrelate to produce necroecologies or are produced by necroecologies. So, in the chapter on geology of the morals, what I take from the chapter is the issue of differentiation between the strata. And we do that on the basis of variance of content and expression. As Deleuze and Guattari write, what varies from one stratum to another is the nature of this real distinction, and the nature and the respective position of the terms distinguished. So the first strata Deleuze and Guattari discuss is the one where the difference between the two is primarily one of order of magnitude or scale. That is, the molecular content of that system has its own form corresponding to the distribution of elemental masses and action of one molecule upon another. Similarly, expression has a form manifesting the statistical aggregate and state of equilibrium existing on the macroscopic level. End of quote. This stratum is called physico-chemical stratum. It is the stratum where molar can be said to express microscopic molecular interactions. In other words, expression depends on the content, and the process of moving from content to expression is called induction. In another stratum, called organic, expression becomes independent of content. Expression becomes linear, unidimensional, expressed as a genetic code. It is now a transduction. And finally, in the third layer that is discussed, we get translation, overcoding, and superlinearity compared to the linearity of the organic. This layer is called alloplastic, and it is characterized by temporal linearity, where form of expression becomes linguistic and no longer genetic as in organic layer. Alloplastic layer includes symbols that are comprehensible, transmittable, and modifiable from outside. And most importantly for our discussion, Deleuze and Guattari write that, and quote, what some call the properties of human beings, technology and language, tool and symbol, freehand and supple larynx, gesture and speech, are in fact properties of this new distribution. So on a alloplastic layer, content is linked with hand-tool couple, while expression with the face-language couple. The hand in this sense is a way of coding, the manual form, not a simply bodily organ. The hand, quote, as a general form of content is extended in tools, which are themselves active forms implying substances or formed matters. So manual formal characteristics give a unity to the alloplastic layer. It is what stabilizes, so to speak, the movement of matter. And in the case of organic layer, that means the deterritorializations and reterritorializations of bodily organs, such as paws and feet in animals. In regards to expression, the form of expression becomes linguistic. That is, the substance of expression is vocal, which involves, and quote, not only the larynx, but the mouth and lips, and the overall motoricity of the face, end of quote. Deleuze and Guattari underline that a whole intensive map must be accounted for, snout being deterritorialized as the mouth, and then lips seen as a deterritorialization of the mouth, and then filling one's mouth with words instead of food and noises. And all of this in relation to the becoming of the supple larynx. To articulate, to speak, is to speak softly. So there is the manual articulation of the content and the facial articulation of expression. The manual articulation includes the hand and the tools, that is the technology. It is the technical social machines and formations of power. In the most basic way, it includes fire as a kind of the first technology or tool. The facial articulation includes the supple larynx and the face, that is the speech and the language. It includes the collective semiotic machine, the regimes of signs. So the intensive mapping of these two articulations overlaps. And we can ask what kind of intensities are produced here, or around which intensities these two gather and construct themselves. I would argue that two main sets of intensities could be called warmness and softness. Warmness in several senses. First sense is the most direct one, given that the production of fire is, I think, the first kind of technology invented by Homo sapiens sapiens. It was invented to warm up the bodies as well as to cook the food. The fire and the intensity of warmness also produces an interiority of the group which gathers around the fire. This is also where this articulation overlaps with the facial articulation and the loudness intensity, as and loudness I see as a part of the softness, because it's a question of differential relations, as this gathering around also produces a community that has its own inside and outside, produced through feelings of being a part of the group. Loudness also, and seemingly at odds with the supple larynx argument, relates to the manual articulation in the form of communication technologies used to transport voice across distances, and that's especially the case today. So we do speak softly, but that softness is amplified through technology. Also, the softness is effectuated in the movements of deterritorializations or foldings of the abstract animal. As noted, paws are deterritorialized into hands, and then hands into free hands, and not only hands used for grabbing. Snout is deterritorialized into mouth, and mouth then into lips. So there is a kind of softness to the abstract animal, or in terms used so far, plasticity or plasticness. Furthermore, if we want to be cynical about it, we can say that the warmness intensity is now expanded to encompass the whole planet, considering the global warming and the rising temperatures caused by the use of fossil fuels to produce the fire in no metaphorical sense of the word. It can be argued, seen from this point, that softness, this folding of the abstract animal that produces the human animal, is strongly related to the warmness, and that both are important Mecanthropocene intensities. So that was my part on the softness, warmness, and related to the softness or the amplification of intensity of softness, loudness intensity, and how they relate in production of the human animal, and how these then relate to the Anthropocene, or rather now Mecanthropocene issues. Next intensity that I would like to talk about is whiteness. And at the very beginning of the chapter titled Year Zero, Officiality, Deleuze and Guattari write that there is a very special mechanism situated at the intersection of significance and subjectification. And I quote, "Oddly enough, it is a face, the white wall black hole system. A broad face with white cheeks, a chalk face with eyes cut in for a black hole, clown head, white clown, moon white mine, angel of death, holy shroud." And I will quote again at a greater length, "The face itself is redundancy. It is itself in redundancy with the redundancies of significance and or frequency, and those of resonance or subjectivity. The face constructs the wall that the signifier needs in order to bounce off of. It constitutes the wall of the signifier, the frame or screen. The face digs the hole that subjectification needs in order to break through. It constitutes the black hole of subjectivity as consciousness or passion, the camera, the third eye." And I would like to add here that occurred to me while I was coming here today, that actually this part is about the way the whiteness intensity is produced in relation to the surface that is white, and then the black hole of subjectivity for the eyes, that the white wall, the white surface that serves as an inscription surface for subjectification, has to be soft as well in order to be able to be inscribed. So there's another aspect to the whiteness and to this whole mechanism, if seen from the point of intensities, and that this white wall has to be pliant or soft enough in order to be inscribed. Here the key term is, of course, white. It's whiteness that is produced and needed for the whole system to work. The system losing a theory called the black hole white wall system and its abstract machine of faciality. And I talk about this in this context because of this work, Catherine Yusuf's book, A Billion Black Anthropocenes or None, and that's here. So, and the argument is that it's the racial difference that's the engine, that was the engine, that especially the transatlantic slave trade, for the birth of this new geological period that we call the Anthropocene. So it's race that underlines the capitalist, exploitation, the movement of species, non-human animals and plants, the extraction of resources, natural resources, the so-called resources. So all of that was actually enabled by the transatlantic slave trade. So we necessarily have to include considerations of race if we talk about the Anthropocene, that is the global warming, the extinction of species, the pollution, and so on. But on the other hand, what I want to do here is to recognize this, and this is the case for the planetary condition of the Anthropocene. But following up on my previous lecture, I want to connect this to the local context. So I will talk about race here in Serbia, all the while recognizing that actually this is the planetary framework, and it is felt here as well because of the various movements of matter. But situation here is a bit different. And in what sense? I will explicate that now. So, while it may seem surprising given the different historical and cultural context, I rely, or rather read along, the more recent work in Afro-pessimist thought in the approach to the phenomenon of race in the Balkans, and especially in Serbia. And the difference is that Serbia never had a historical experience of neither slavery nor colonialism. Actually, socialist Yugoslavia was part of the non-aligned bloc during the Cold War, which actively fought against colonialism, or that is for decolonialization. So in that sense, at least, these regions don't have the same experience of colonialism or slavery. However, there are different kinds of productions of race, or that is the processes of racialization. And even more, the historical fact that during those years when slavery and colonialism were developing and reaching their peak, these regions were actually under the rule of Ottoman Empire. So these were the colonies actually at that time, sort of. So it is important to note that I'm not setting up any analogies between the historical and contemporary experiences of Black and Roma people, and I will be talking about Roma people here. So these racialized experiences are different, and I'm trying to think alongside the concepts developed within the Afro-pessimist thought, and thinking along actually enables me to see how this intensity of whiteness is located here. So I follow Alexander G. Veheli's, who defines whiteness and white supremacy as a logic of social organization that produced regimented, institutionalized, and militarized conceptions of hierarchized human difference, while blackness designates a changing system of unequal power structures that apportion and delimit which humans can claim to full human status and which humans cannot. So according to him, racializing assemblages construe race not as a biological or cultural classification, but as a set of socio-political processes that discipline humanity into full humans, not quite humans, and non-humans. Furthermore, Zakiya Iman Jackson writes about ontological plasticity, and here's the term again. As the result of racialization in the United States, meaning that black individuals can at the same time be attributed such cultural characteristics as to appear subhuman and superhuman. More precisely, plasticity is defined as a, quote, a mode of transmogrification whereby the fleshy being of blackness is experimented with as it were infinitely malleable lexical and biological matter, such that blackness is produced as superhuman at once, a form where form shall not hold, potentially everything and nothing at the register of ontology. So for Jackson, the aim of plasticity is to fluidify life and fleshy existence. It is a praxis that seeks to define the essence of blackened thing as infinitely mutable in anti-black, often paradoxical, sexuating terms as a means of hierarchically delineating sex, gender, reproduction, and state of being more generally. End of quote. So a specific kind of relation between human and non-human animals follows from this kind of ontological plasticity that pertains only to the black people. Namely, according to Jackson, the African's humanity is not denied, but appropriated, inverted, and ultimately plasticized in the methodology of objecting animality, meaning that the discourse of the animal is formed through enslavement and the colonial encounter encompassing both human and non-human forms of life. End of quote. So blackness comes to signify animalized humanity, that portion of humans that are included in universal humanity, but as lower humans, those humans who are closer to animals. Plasticity then names this ontological malleability of blackness that at the same time is both human and animal, and that enables the very difference between these forms of life. So, before discussing how the whiteness, what does the whiteness do in relation to the Roma people here, I would like for us to see this video. It's a short 1.5 minutes, and then I'll take it from there. That's it. Yeah, so if you think you saw nothing much there, that was the point. This is a piece made by Zoran Todorović. It's called Cigani Psi, Gypsies and Dogs. And if it sounds offensive, it is. In Todorović, in his own words, realized the video, and quote, as a street intervention where begging children and city stray dogs equipped with hidden micro cameras were filming segments of their everyday existence, and particularly some of its symptomatic moments. So on the right side, my right, we had the videoed experience of Roma children collecting money on the streets from the car drivers. And on my left, we had a video of dogs experience. So that was the camera attached to dogs, ownerless dogs who were just wandering around the city. So that was the work, the structure of the work. So, and this is actually a 2-channel video installation, and he showed it in several places, but I will get there. So, Todorović conceived the piece with the title as a functional part of the work construction, with the idea that it would create presumptions and expectations within the public, expected to interpret the presented visual content along those lines. The visual content was conceptually and technically realized with lots of noise and imprecision, thus not providing much information about the filmed event. This informal void was filled in by the public, inscribing their own content onto these images depending on the position each person was occupying in relation to the racist political code or the code of political correctness, which is also a way of marking the other. So he presented this video installation first at the Museum of Contemporary Arts Vojvodina in Novi Sad in 2009, and then in the Museum of History of Yugoslavia as a part of the 50th October Salon in 2009. And whenever it was shown, it caused an uproar in the public, including the NGO sector. Even I think some government bodies were involved because it was seen as intentionally offensive, to say the least, so intentionally racist. There were several also public debates about this piece, and one of those was held in 2012, and another one later on. So it's a sort of ongoing piece still, although it was produced in 2007. So in a sense, and that is sort of also his point, the piece becomes network of variously connected matters, including the video installation, but also the reactions, texts, public discussions, and so all of that actually becomes a networked piece of art. But I use this as and several screenshots. I thought that they would help actually to see what's going on, but not really. What I use this it's coming later. So what why was this piece important for me? Because the Roma people in Serbia, in contradistinction to what Jackson writes about the uses of black flesh, never appear superhuman, except perhaps when they are used for children of Serbs to be scared into obedience by their parents. There is that story like the Roma people will steal you if you're naughty or something like that. So yeah, it's pretty much the stuff of everyday life, that saying, disciplinary saying. So the Roma are in contradistinction, and this is why I say I read along the Afro-pessimist thought. The Roma people are not made in relation to whiteness ontologically plastic, but rigid. So there is another intensity or degree of intensity involved here. So while we have whiteness and softness in the case of relation of whiteness and blackness, in the case of darkness of the Roma people, I would say that we have whiteness and rigidness, not the softness. So the Roma are not made ontologically plastic, but rigid. Their ontological status is produced as subhuman through the processes of racialization, and it remains as such. The Roma are still human, though excluded from the socius. The dogs, from the title, and the dogs that live with them are their companion animals, and in this case there is setting up of a relation between the ownerless street dogs and street children. So children are in this video actually made equal with dogs. They're both on the streets. So that's the title. Where is the title coming from? They both roam the streets and they don't have home in the sense that ethnic Serbs have homes. So the animals, the dogs that live with the Roma people are also produced as their companion animals, but they're also included. Exclusion and racialization and animalization act at the same time, mutually conditioning each other, producing an effect of ontological rigidity. Neither the Roma people nor their companion animals can move beyond their designated environment, meaning that there is no upward social mobility for the Roma, nor there is becoming pet of their animals. And this is the ontologically rigid space-time that they share, in the sense that there is no mutability or change. Or if there is one, in relation to rigidity, is a very slow one. So we return to the slow violence that I talked in one of the previous lectures in relation to the necroecologies. So in contrast to the Roma animal assemblage, ethnic Serbian animal rationality is also produced as ontologically rigid, but in the terms of voluntary relationality with animals. While ethnic white Serbs are not movable or malleable in both ontological and spatio-temporal terms, their relation with animals is what contributes to their racialization as white, in the sense that becoming pet of an animal is what enables ethnic Serbian difference from non-white Roma people and their non-pet animals. And why I also at the same time insist on not only ontological rigidity but also on spatio-temporal rigidity is because the Roma people are usually in informal settlements and on the margins of the city. It's really hard for the Romani to move out of them because of exactly what I'm talking here about. So there is the intertwining of ontological rigidity and ontological rigidity and the spatial-temporal rigidity are produced at the same time and condition each other. So whiteness of Serbs is caused as a voluntary relationship with animals in the form of keeping pets which is performed in an orderly manner, such as walking the pets on leash in designated areas within public spaces, usually public parks, so pets do not roam the streets, nor they're ownerless, but they're very tied and literally tied to their owners. This also affects human-animal differences and relations in general, as the Roma and their relation to animals are erased from the public view. They're becoming companion of the animals, while the dominant image of animal as a pet in urban ecology is maintained, and through it the humanness as whiteness, or whiteness as humanness. And this is where this piece plays an important role, and art in general, also in the same production that I've been talking about here. So this piece of work at the same time points to this what I've been talking about, but I would not just wash my hands with the pointing. I would also say that it also produces the same racial difference and difference between the species. No matter how provocative may sound, no matter how politically important the piece is, by the very fact of relating these relations, it also takes a part in the effectuation of the whiteness intensity in this sense. So that was part on whiteness, and I would like to talk about the next intensity, and that's playfulness. So I relate this intensity to the chapter title of the refrain, and it's dated to 1837, and I found out that was the year when Berlioz composed his Requiem. But I would like to start, I mean, there is a reason why I chose this chapter, but I would like to start with a quote from the previous chapter, and it's I think the last page of that chapter. It's from the chapter 1730, Becoming Intense, Becoming Animal. So Deleuze write, and I quote, "Same thing that leads a musician to discover the birds also leads him to discover the elementary and the cosmic. Both combine to form a block, a universe fiber, a diagonal or complex space. Music dispatches molecular flows. Of course, as Messiaen says, music is not the privilege of human beings. The universe, the cosmos, is made of refrains. The question in music is that of a power of deterritorialization permeating nature, animals, the elements, and deserts as much as human beings. The question is more what is not musical in human beings and what already is musical in nature." And they deal with these issues in this chapter, the chapter on the refrain. And I use this quote and the reference to this chapter to begin to ask what else is shared between human and non-human animals and perhaps the universe. Looking at what is common from the point of view of intensities, I would argue that human and non-human animals also share playfulness as an intensity. Or to put it differently, that the abstract animal, and I had that quote on the abstract animal in one of the previous lectures, so that the abstract animal in its foldings folds playfulness differentially in order to produce both the difference and continuum between various animals, including human and non-human animals. So playfulness is intensity shared by the human and non-human animals in the foldings of the abstract animals. So all that would be my argument, and we'll see if it holds up. So As before, I would like to start with some definitions from dictionary, and in this case, it's a Cambridge Dictionary online, and I used it for definitions of play. And play as a verb is defined as to enjoy, as in when you play, especially as a child, you spend time doing an enjoyable and or entertaining activity. There's also play as a verb is also defined as game, as in to take part in a game or other organized activity. Also, it's defined as act, as in to perform an entertainment or a particular character in a play, to behave or pretend in a particular way, especially in order to produce a particular effect or result. And finally, to produce sound pictures, as in to perform music on an instrument. So, as we can see, there are many meanings, and here I take play in two senses. In the sense of to take part in activity that is not serious, but done for enjoyment, and in the sense of to perform in broader performative sense. So I do so in order to explore what kind of intensities of playfulness are constructed and expressed by practices of drag as found here in Belgrade, especially in relation to the question of intensity of whiteness. What I want to say is that there is another kind of relation between whiteness and animals expressed through playfulness or in relation to playfulness, but that relation is expressed in the necroecological space of Savamala, and we'll go there. Probably you've already been there, and I will talk about the space in a moment, which means that it also connects to the plasticness, as discussed 2 days ago, and the effects of functionalization and aestheticization of plasticness as expressed through the stretchy space. In other words, while drag appears as a subversive practice on one level, it also participates as a practice in processes that are necroecological and a part of the Anthropocene conditions more generally. But I do find the subversive aspect of stretching or extending the humanness through playfulness and connecting the playfulness in drag with the animality, actually an important point where we can find a shared ground, especially in these times during the sixth extinction of animal and plant species. So, drag has gained unprecedented visibility in Belgrade in recent years. For example, on cable television channel N1, a 10-minute segment about drag artists was shown on primetime program The Scene in 2019. Two queens, Decadenza and Carmagedonia, described how they transform into their drag selves and what drag means to them. For Decadenza, transformation is the key to drag performance, where one's everyday life, everyday self yields to the drag character. Her inspiration is the everyday woman, and as she says, chewed up by patriarchy and capitalism, yet who possesses inner strength. Carmagedonia said that she became interested in drag through RuPaul's Drag Race and pop culture more generally. For both performers, drag is an artistic practice which is, quote, not related to personal preferences, end of quote, meaning that drag does not equate with being either gay, lesbian, or transgender. Moreover, for Decadenza, drag is an alternative kind of performance art available to everyone, and that is for everyone. According to her, it is a misconception to think of drag as fundamentally tied, and quote again, biological men, especially as, and quote again, move toward a post-gender society. Carmagedonia adds that drag does not have to relate to gender at all, and that contemporary forms of and expressions of drag may be inspired by animals, insects, and even aliens. So in the interview, Decadenza went so far in de-essentializing drag, if I can say so, as to say that there is no drag community in Belgrade. Rather, they all share a hobby. It is a play, an enjoyable and or entertaining activity to relate to the definitions I read out before. So what interests me here is how this drag playfulness implicates animals, and as Carmagedonia said, drag does not have to be related to gender at all, but it can be inspired by animals, insects, and also aliens. So it doesn't have to be to have anything at all with humans. And in this specific case, it's the animals that interest me. So, more than a simple mimetic relationship between drag and animals lies in what, following Brian Massumi, can be called animalesque, a shared intensive continuum of playfulness that suspends ontic separateness between the human and the non-human animal. And to quote from Massumi's book, What Animals Teach Us About Politics, there is an esqueness to the ludic gesture that marks its qualitative difference from the analog gestures of the arena of activity that is being played upon. The gesture's esqueness is the performative signature of the mode of abstraction at play. It embodies the standing for. It is the inactive sign of the action's value. In itself, it is pure standing for, pure expressive value, the very element of the ludic in expression, as a form of lived abstraction. The esqueness of the act instantiates the play value of the game. So in this quote is very fine that continuum between the human being who performs drag and the animalness of the inspiration, and that's the link where the continuum between the human and the non-human animal is produced. And as we can see here in Ostrogami's little square, she uses comparison to fish. I mean, there are lots of meaning to that, but it's the fish. It's not any other animal or non-animal. In this case, we have the costumes. So the central drag queen uses the wings and the horns, and the fingers look like talons. So there's that again. Animals or animal forms are used as an inspiration. So the continuum between the human and non-human animal lies in the mutual implication produced by the play seen in the abstract qualitative mode, in the intensive mode. The continuum lies in this qualitative virtual dimension of reality. The continuum, as well as the difference between the ludic and any other gesture, furthermore, does not mean sameness, but difference in quality together with a zone of indiscernibility. They are, quote, performatively fused without becoming confused, end of quote. Animalesque drag as a form of ludic gesture keeps the qualitative difference between human and non-human animals, but at the same time fuses them together, bringing them into the mutual implication and into the spectrum of continual variation. This fusion, however, occurs within particular space-time. Drag is a relatively young phenomenon in Serbia, and it appeared in Belgrade only when certain conditions were met: gentrification and the attendant expansion of cultural industry. Production of infrastructures is tied to a couple of cultural industry hotspots in Belgrade, mostly the Savamala neighborhood. In the early 2000s, Savamala was a neglected part of the city and the location of gay and lesbian club apartment. It was also a scene of frequent organized gay bashing. However, in 2010s, Savamala was rebranded as a bohemian creative district of the city, and a number of bars, galleries, and clubs opened, including Kulturni Centar Grad, Cultural Center City, one of the culture industry as well as drag activity hotspots. The drag shows with costumes inspired by animals and human beings from mythology took place there up until the beginning of 2020, and the pandemic, and I believe they also continued as soon as the lockdowns were done or called off. So Savamala neighborhood with these changes also became a space for intense redevelopment with the Belgrade waterfront project, and it's just literally down the street, and you will see it when you go there, that I have this, it's the last one. The Kutsagrad is here to the right, and the waterfront project is literally just down the street, so it's a single space actually, and the waterfront is built that way, or rather these buildings were the Kutsagrad where Kutsagrad is, they were kept as a place to go out and have fun for the apartment owners in these buildings. So, but I will return to this later on. So, Savamala neighborhood has become a space of intense redevelopment with the Belgrade waterfront project, and the official reason for redevelopment circulating in public discourse is economic growth through consumption, and to the point, Belgrade waterfront contains what is described as the largest shopping mall in the Balkans, together with other commercial venues. As Eagle Hills, the main investor company in the construction, proclaims, and this is quote, Belgrade waterfront takes urban renewal to new heights, a smart city for a future that combines commerce, culture, and community. And it does in the last picture, indeed. End of quote. The larger redevelopment at Belgrade front is, according to Vera Backović, a sociologist, a combination of commercial and residential luxury space. It is a foreign investment project for which the state provided land and offered clear support. If realized on the planned scale, it will transform that part of the city through the process of profitable gentrification. The space will only be affordable for members of the elite and foreign citizens. And the project has been controversial from the very beginning for reasons including the influx of unchecked foreign capital that destructively altered the local landscape, and with it decades-old local ways of life, producing conflict zones throughout the entire city of Belgrade. And I've been talking about the conflict zones as a way of necropolitical technologies of management, but as well as necroecological technology of management of both human and non-human animal and plant species. It has been seen, the Belgrade Waterfront project, as a project of national importance by the political establishment, while as an architectural, urbanistic, and ecological monstrosity by its opponents. It contains the tallest high-rise in Belgrade, the largest shopping mall in the Balkans, and it will be one of the most densely populated neighborhoods once all the apartment buildings are finished and inhabited. And they're being constructed all the time. You can see through the window, actually, it's right there. The construction work has never stopped, and I really have no idea where they're putting all those buildings anymore. But apparently there's space. So, however, Belgrade waterfront is being built in the space that used to be a marshy riverside environment behind the main train station called Bara Venezia, or Venice Pond, that has already been subjected to the various environmental maltreatments. Besides numerous animal and plant species, it also included a number of informal settlements inhabited by the poor and Roma people again, who were displaced by the waterfront work. The surrounding area, including Salamala neighborhood, was almost completely torn down, illegally at that, for the waterfront project. And I told you they kept certain buildings just for the, how they say it, for the combination of commerce, culture, and community. Spaces of Barra Venezia and Salamala were cast as, quote, layers of junkies and snakes, end of quote, in public discourse by the government bodies and even the President of the Republic, while the local environment was destroyed by both legal and illegal means, and the Sava River bank was cleared for construction work despite mass protests that had been going on for months when the illegal tearing down of certain buildings occurred. So Belgrade Waterfront Project has been producing conflict zones from the time it began as an idea, and it continued to do so until this day. Conflict zones produced here include not only conflicts between humans and local environment, but also conflicts between various groups of humans, with the state force most directly pointed against poor and those cast as racially different, making the necropolitical aspect of necroecology more visible compared to other parts of the city. And it is here that the animalesque politics of Serbian post-socialist drag come to play an important role. So bringing together animalesque drag and the necroecological environment produced on the banks of the Sava River, a further aspect of mutual implication of whiteness and animality appears. As both necroecological devastation and animalesque drag function at the level of the intensive dimension, there is an implication of drag in necroecological technologies of government. That is, while animalesque drag on the one hand plugs in animality into culture industry and gentrification processes, these very same processes render animalesque drag, and any drag for that matter, relationally poor by the virtue of suppressing any other relation except the one attached to the production of profit. Animalesque drag, with its production of surplus value of life through ludic performative gestures, on the other hand, upsets the gluing together of anthropocentricity, of whiteness, heteronormativity, cisgenderism, and the processes for the extraction of surplus value. But animality, as made available for extraction of surplus value through the intensive continuum of playfulness, well, at the same time, animals disappear from the devastated environment of the Savamala. Whiteness of animalesque drag enters into extractive relation with animals in the necroecological space, casting away the rigidity of ontological difference that is produced when it comes to the relation between the Roma, the ethnic Serbs, and the animality. And throughout all of these, we can see, and I would end with that, we can see interplays of whiteness, softness, and plasticness in the effectuation of playfulness, which disrupts cis-heteronormativity of society at large, even though it is effectuated in the necroecologies. So, and I would end with the sentiment that there are within the Mechano-Anthropocene 1,000 necroecologies, following up on that there are as many intensities as there are names for the new geological epoch. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I was actually expecting you, I have to say, to sort of talk about the intensities of plastic. So go something different. But my question for you is sort of, I think there's a different kind of line, starting with radical Black thought today, that would actually argue less about this connection of not the connection rather, but the presence of like animality, and more towards the direction of thinking blackness is actually the status of living commodity, or like the status of actually, the production of means of production rather. And I guess it's sort of difficult to articulate, but there is a direct link there, I think, with thingness, and then also the artificiality with someone like Barthes connects to both drug and also anti-production. And I think on a global level, that actually allows us to think about finance a lot more, but I don't know whether it is something that might work on the local level. I guess I'm kind of curious about how this presence of animality links to the artificiality and also sort of economic position of plastic. I think there's so much going on in this project, and I'm super curious to see the whole thing and where it goes. But yeah, I'm sort of trying to kind of connect the dots here, and I was wondering if you could sort of...
Well, I wasn't necessarily talking about plastics as material here. I wanted to move away actually from that, and to cast a look from that point, from taking intensity, as I was talking about the malleability, pliability of the plastics and the plasticness, and actually see what other intensities could be found, not necessarily related to plastic matter or the plasticness, though apparently it could be related, with the softness in the sense of pliability. So this would be another line. I just wanted to explore what other Anthropocene intensities could be found in the Thousand Plateaus. But, and this is why I insisted to return to the question of animality and thingness. I insisted on thinking along Afro-pessimism, because I don't think the Roma people are thingified, as the blacks were during the slavery. So that's why I say along and not with, because it's not the same. At least I don't think it's the same. Some others may argue differently, but I don't think there is thingness of the Roma people here.
I thought that might be the case, but the one thing that I would say in relation to this is that I think when you focus on black optimism, what you find is actually a defense of statelessness and fugitivity that could be applicable to that as a sort of, as an anterior to citizenship, as actually the plague. Yeah, thank you.
I don't want to say that Roma people are not objectified. They are, but they're not thingified in that sense. So, yeah. But yeah, I agree about the fugitivity.
Yeah, hi, hello. Thank you very much for this wonderful lectures. I'm really interested in the idea of how humans perceive animals. So yeah, you were talking about blackness as something that is at the same time as has like a human and non-human an animal nature at the same time. And there is this idea that we cannot overcome the inequality between humans because we should first overcome the inequality between humans and all other non-human forms of life. So I was wondering, what's your idea of that? And do you think that this inequality and this hierarchy between human and non-human species can be overcome eventually? Because like when you were talking about drag, and this is very interesting, but I was thinking about like maybe those drag artists, maybe they just appropriate animal features and do not free animals from this power relations. Yeah.
Well, I was being optimistic with that part. To try to find something to hold on to when it comes to the finding that common ground between humans and animals. So that was me being optimistic. So, but speaking of these hierarchies, I mean, I don't not how to say this. I don't think it's what comes first. I mean, it's not a temporal issue, but an ontological issue. So we have to think those issues, differences between humans and non-humans at the same time, because they're produced at the same time and they actually rely on each other and pojačati, ko ovdje priča srpski, amplify each other or resonate with each other as a resonating box. So those differences between humans and animals and within the humans come at the same time. So I think they should be addressed at the same time. So that would be my answer to that.
So I think here and here.
This is more of a comment than a question, but it might lean on the previous question. Now, these stories that you mentioned about Roma people and the animals and the drag community and Belgrade waterfront all kind of merge, and I think that maybe interesting line in the story might also be that in the year when Belgrade waterfront was supposed to be building, there was, how is it called? A refugee center on that place. So they kind of destroyed the entire refugee center during the night without telling anyone. And all the people were moved further. And still in that part of the town, you have the refugees all around the cities, all around the streets. And that's something that you know, but I'm telling it because of the other people. But also, I really liked how you merged the idea of the drag community with playfulness. I deal with play, so that's kind of very good example. But I'm kind of worried that there's something kind of disturbing in it, and that's a good thing. It should be like that, bit of disturbance for thought. But very often for other people, it is difficult to accept something like that because of that disturbances. And very often we don't notice so easily things that are already happening on the street that also might be disturbant. Like there are people who are Roma and who dress like women, and we see them sometimes on the street, and we don't talk about them, we talk about the drag community. It is something different, I understand, but it also happens as well as we talk about animality now in the drag community and in the performance, and we skip the animals on the streets. So it has some sort of elitism in these performances, and I'm not quite sure that this sort of performance can interrupt what's happening in Belgrade waterfront, or it will be appropriated by what's happening in Belgrade waterfront. So it is just dilemma.
Yeah, of course, but I was just trying to find a way to think about, again, the common ground between humans and animals and see where it goes from there. So I think there's much to be done with exploration of playfulness and how that particular intensity is shared by the human and non-humans, but also other intensities. I mean, this is just only one that I mentioned, and there must be countless ones, I suppose, I don't know, that also can be used in a way, so to say, as an inspiration to construct more or different kinds of intensities that would actually could act or influence in a more direct way the state of the affairs. But yeah, I'm also struggling with with the idea that doing what I'm doing with theory and how that can actually translate to what's going on really in these spaces. But yeah, there's only so much one can do.
When you mentioned play, it reminded me Gadamer's theory of play, like in Truth and Method, and the way he talks about play is so much more different than not much different, but when he talks about play, it's more so like the actors are supposed to lose themselves in play, and he gives the example of like maybe not him or an interpreter of him, there was this example of like a child imitating a frog, and like you would never want to acknowledge that when you're watching the child, that it's still the child. He would receive it much better if you acknowledge that they're the frog, for example. So it's like the playfulness there is more so that the actor is losing themselves in the act, for example. And what I see that as a shift in play is that we've, like, even with like drag, is that art is more meta in a sense, where like you acknowledge the actors even when they're like cosplaying as something completely different, like a bug, for example. You still recognize the person in the act. And I think that's because like we view ourselves a lot from a third view point, and like art is really meta. So a lot of artists like to like recognize their the shortcomings of their act or style before anyone points it out. Like, I don't know if it was a big hit here, but there was a new Nathan Fielder show where he basically just studies his method and character instead of like creating something new. So in everything he does, it's like you know that they are actors. And I like the bug example of drag because when you like look at the earlier styles of drag, like in Paris is Burning, it's more so like people cosplaying as American stereotypes, whether it be like a sailor or like a masculine man or whatever. But now it's like the examples in drag are so far out that you can never really go beyond the actor themselves. So I wanted to ask like about that shift in the definition of play and why we've become so accustomed to like the meta aspect of art and acting and recognizing the actor in like everything they do.
Well, that actually ties in perfectly with the quote from Masumi's book. And that part of the sentence that says, "Performatively fused without becoming confused." So we keep both the human and the animal inspiration separate. And it's also at the same time one whole. So, but it's important to keep them separate while them being also the same, because I mean, humans and animals are different kinds of animals, but also because it's about constructing the intensity of playfulness. The intensity is never there, and it is being constructed, and in order for it to be constructed, there need to be distinct actors in it, as in elements, not actors, as in acting in a play. I do think that it is important that there is that difference and recognizability of performer and the role the performer performs. Otherwise, I don't think there would be that ludic gesture that is important. So that it wouldn't turn into this production of intensive continuum between the human and the animal to play.
All right. I think we have time for one last question.
I mean, sorry, just a second. I mean, it's not about the mimetic relation. So the performers, at least these performers, are not imitating animals. It's not about the representation of animals in any sort of way, but it's exactly the point that it's non-representational relation that is produced here, and that is intensive continuum, that is playfulness. Sorry.
It should already be on.
I both liked and disliked your lecture. I find it kind of confusing because it has so many angles that make it confusing. And you started in the geological time, and I think it's important to, when talking about geology, to think of how long time the human being have been on Earth, when we look at these things, strata, and if you have transferred a human life, it could potentially could be 100 years. The humanity has been on Earth for 1 second. So I think that's important when we talk of this geological time spectrum. But from that, and I have many questions about the plastic, but I would rather talk to you outside this forum. But what I really, when you showed the movie, I was very anxious to know what was the discussion about. What did people discuss? What came up? What was the interest? What made this movie stay on the stage for over 10 years, almost a long time.
Yeah.
So there has to be a very interesting discussion, and I miss the discussion. What was it about?
There is a material on the artist's website. So it's in English also. So whoever wants the details can find them. But in a nutshell, people were upset mostly. People were mostly, and when I say people, so that they're non-governmental and governmental bodies, upset by the use of children first, and use of children in relation to animals. So the children were being equated with animals. And on top of that, it was also the Roma children who were equated with animals. And many people saw that as a claim that these Roma children are animals. And that was deemed unacceptable.
I thought it was about that, but
yeah, so.
As you didn't express it, that I couldn't know. So I think that's about play. I think the play is a very important action, which we normally don't talk that much about. And play is one of what, in education, play is very important, but we don't talk about it. And as from the idea of communicating things, I think play is one of the ways to make change. And playfulness is necessary to do these changes. But I think it's important to make a difference between what is performance and what is the performativity in this case when we talk about play. Mm-hmm. And how play can be a learning action or a critique. Mm-hmm. Which is also matter in this matter.
Although, I mean, I have to ask back. So, don't we, by playing, also at the same time learn and perform? And that's exactly what is happening even in drag performances. I mean, they perform for fun, but people in the audience at the same time have fun, but also learn things about popular culture or about gender relations. So it comes at the same time, and here as well.
But it's also a critique of gender.
It is, but why
and
would
how
it?
What gender is, how we situate gender.
Yeah.
So it's both the performance and the performativity, but it's important to actually actualize that, what we mean with it when we lift it as an important take of play, I think.
So it's a question of just being more explicit about the different intentions of...
I don't think about intentionality. I don't think it's about intentionality.
No,
Well-
okay.
So I'm sorry to cut you off there. Yeah, but perhaps that could be a conversation for the pub, as most conversations should be. Saying. All right, so it is 5:30, and we will have to leave here shortly. So please first join me in one last round of applause for a really wonderful talk. And see y'all back here at 9:30 in the morning for Ian's first workshop of the morning. Thank y'all.
Thank you.